Greetings, everyone. We're the Sons. Welcome back to the Essentials for Marriage. If you were able to join us last week, you heard us talk about rebuilding our emotional connection. And this week, we are under a topic about forgiveness and learning to fight and learning to reconcile. Under this, you think about our vows in marriage, we say the words, "till death do us part." And sometimes in relationship, it feels like death because we're in cycles of fighting and brokenness. And so in the next hour, we're going to spend time learning about how to forgive one another and how not to apologize, and how do I become a partner that actually can be a grittier, stronger relationship because we've learned how to reconcile. Not just an easy, "oh, I'm sorry," but no, actually doing the work of rebuilding when we've hurt each other. And then we're going to turn to you all, and you're going to have some time to practice this, practice forgiving. We're going to give you even a script, and there'll be a time in tonight's episode where you'll actually do this work. And then we'll come back together to say some final words, encourage, and pray for you. Our hope is that this is kind of a date night of sorts for you to work on becoming all that God has for you in your marriage.
So if you were with us last week, what we talked about was how to identify the cycles of disconnection that most marriages struggle with. So cycles of getting stuck in pursue and withdraw dynamics. And so we sent you out with some homework. We hope that went well. We hope you had a chance over the course of the week to just identify those stuck places, to just say, we're doing that thing. We're doing that thing where you pursue me or I withdraw from you, and this doesn't feel good. And so ideally, then you took it to that next step where you were able to say, this is what's going on for me. The primary emotion I'm feeling is one of disconnection or sadness or loss or maybe anger or frustration. The primary is what we're going to tell our partner we're feeling that they typically don't see, but what we express is typically secondary. It's protective, it's reactive. If you didn't have a chance to watch that, we encourage you to go back and take a look so you can learn that too. And then finally, we encouraged you to get out of that cycle of disconnection and into a cycle of reconnection by telling your partner one thing they could do to draw close to you in that moment, to soften the pursuer or to re-engage that withdrawer. And a lot of this comes from the work of Sue Johnson and her emotionally focused therapy research, which I do as a marriage and family therapist. Tonight, the idea of reconciling, forgiving, and working through conflict does come from this phrase from our marriage vows, "till death do us part."
Yeah, that's a tricky one for me. We've been married, Heather and I have been married 21 years. I'm a pastor at Bethany Community Church. Heather's a marriage and family therapist and owns Navigate Family Therapy. And I had an idea that when we got married, that healthy relationships never fought. Good marriages never struggled. So I had this idol that when we got good enough, there'll be no conflicts. And so when conflict happened, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know, are we broken? Am I broken? Is she broken? And we're 21 years of marriage in and still learning this. But healthy relationships must learn to forgive each other. And real resilience happens through reconciliation. So hope tonight in this "till death do us part" segment is that we encourage you to be building skills that when you fight, when you struggle, when you fail each other, that you will be able to do some of the work of reconciliation. And that'll become resilience for you in your marriage story.
Mm-hmm. There's a new view that we want to give you of what it's like to fight, and that this isn't a sense of being dysfunctional, but this is something that you want to find resilience around together. We're going to teach you how to have a redemptive conversation, one that draws you close, one that invites true reconciling change, because this isn't something where out of some sort of perfection we arrive at a place where we don't have conflict. But together we fight dragons. Together we go into battle to overcome something that makes us stronger as a couple.
Yeah, that regulating conflict, which is a John Gottman term, really helped me when we did that training together. It's not about eliminating conflict, it's regulating conflict. So building skills for your marriage, so when conflict arises, we can regulate it and we can become more resilient for it. In the New Testament, the book of Galatians 6:2, Paul says this to the church in Galatia: bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. And that's an incredible statement. Bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. And so it's sometimes even in fighting and in disagreeing and pursuing right relationship that you're actually learning to bear one another's burdens. And what Paul says here is when you do that, you're actually loving each other the way Christ intended. Christ doesn't intend for us to necessarily be in conflict, but conflict is inevitable in human relationships. So if we're going to have healthy relationships, we're going to have to learn to fight. We're going to have to learn to regulate conflict. We're going to have to learn to lean into the challenge of, hey, God has put us together. How can we do a better job of working through the conflict that's right at our fingertips? Ephesians 4 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven. Just as God has forgiven us, we need to do that work of reconciliation with our partner. I used to be a high school English teacher in Los Angeles, and I loved teaching students. And what I found was sometimes the kids that were the grittiest and like most kind of conflict in my classroom often had some of the biggest hearts that they were covering up. It was almost like layers of an artichoke. I'm not the biggest artichoke fan, but my family loves artichokes. But if you think about an artichoke, what lies at the center? The heart. And the artichoke is guarded by all these leaves. And even old artichokes have little thorns on the leaves. And so it's this like peeling away to get to this essence of where a heart is. And so if your relationship is in a lot of conflict, you're not alone. And we find ourselves there too. And so we just want to encourage you tonight that this might be part of your redemptive cycle of really getting some good skills of how to work back towards each other.
Mm-hmm. We want to encourage you that conflict isn't a time to feel a sense of despair, but this can be a chance to really strengthen your bond. And by doing so, we're working towards reconciling these rough patches. We want to give you a different model of what it means to reconcile and redeem these conflictual moments. Oftentimes, there's this idea, well, first and foremost, no one likes conflict, right? 100% across the board. I've never had anybody come into my office and say, I really like conflict. I really want to get good at it. So typically most people avoid it or they struggle through it. And what we want to give you is a step-by-step process that really actually works. But you have to move into the conflict to get to the other side. This isn't just a sweeping under the rug. This isn't a silver lining it or just say you're sorry and move on. You know, forgive and forget and it'll all be better. And I would say that Christians are sometimes the worst at this because we have this idea that we are supposed to move into forgiveness and we forget the redemptive reconciliation part. There are steps towards reconciliation, and forgiveness happens at the end. And so we want to give you a model for that. That this isn't just, be more optimistic, or if you could just be happy. And these are things that, people kind of throw back and forth at each other. Will help you to really articulate the intent of what happened, the impact it had on your partner, and a way out. In this, what's really important is that one person who has caused harm to the other acknowledges the pain that they've harmed. We sometimes too quickly move to the forgive me part, get over it part, right? And if your partner, the person who was hurt, doesn't get a sense that their partner knows that they hurt, that what that pain is like, shows true empathy for that, then you're just kind of these are gonna build and fester over time. So, for all of us who want to avoid conflict and don't like conflict, the quickest way through it is to address it, is to have this redemptive and reconciling conversation. The hurt partner is going to get better at saying, this is what happened for me, and the listening partner is going to be able to understand it and take it in and really become a witness to the pain. That's a term I like to use a lot. We need a witness to our pain. We feel better. I mean, if you think about the essence of what I'm doing in therapies, I'm witnessing people's painful stories and helping them work through to that other side. This is something we do in partnership with each other. We become a witness to each other's pain. And it's amazing when you've been through something hard and it's not about your relationship, and your partner's really there for you, and they really get it. Say that you have a difficult situation at work, or you run that red light and you get the ticket. When your partner has said, oh, that cop shouldn't have been waiting there, and I'm with you, and I understand your pain. Or last week I shared about stubbing my toe on the dishwasher. When a partner can come in and say, oh, let me see it, that hurts so much, you feel better. That's the formula for when you have conflict between you. If you can show that same amount of empathy, that same amount of compassion, and it's hard to do when you've caused the pain. And we're going to teach you step by step how to get there. But this is really key. The antidote to conflict is that bonding moment when you feel like my partner really gets me, and now I feel better. And we'll teach you how to do that.
Yeah, and again, we said it at the top, conflict will happen. So the idea of eliminating it, there's no secret that we can teach you in a YouTube talk that will eliminate all conflict in your relationships. So arm yourself with the fact that you will have conflict. How we repair our conflict, how we regulate our conflict, how we turn back towards each other is actually the work. That's really hard. Like years ago, Heather and I have been married 21 years, and we really want to normalize that conflict happens and periods of disconnection happen. And we've had a few really hard times in our marriage where we're looking at each other like, is this even going to work anymore? And there was a time where I remember we were going to therapy, and we were driving down towards Fremont, towards our therapist's office. And I remember, like, even in the ride to therapy, we were like fighting like crazy. And I remember having this thought, like, why can't she just get over it? Like, she was bringing up this stuff of, when she was pregnant and feeling abandoned by me, and that I wasn't very emotional, and kind of, bringing this stuff out. And part of me is like, can you just get over it already? And I thought the secret towards forgiveness was some sort of like magic cloth, that if Heather could just wipe the past hurt away, then we would be fine again. I had to actually learn how to apologize, learn how to be humble, learn how to be non-defensive. I don't know what you viewing at home, but for me, I really struggle with defensiveness. And so when Heather gets hurt, sometimes I rush to a place of saying like, well, she doesn't get me, or she doesn't see the other things I did. And I have so many stories about that. But I just remember that drive to a therapist's office. What happened that evening was a step towards reconciliation with our therapist. But it was something God was doing between the two of us, of really humbling me to say, when I failed her, Scott, don't run away, and don't become defensive. Learn to say I'm sorry. Learn to know that you really hurt her. And when I started to do that more often, forgiveness started to come more easily.
Mm-hmm. I could share many examples when I've been on the other side too, and I've needed to be the one to forgive and to offer forgiveness. And so there's humble humility both ways there. What we want to teach you is a different dance. Often we become stuck in is it you or is it me? Who's right, who's wrong? And kind of a tug of war. And we want to give you a different idea about conflict, that conflict is something we're doing together. And it's not you and it's not me. It's actually both of us. And we've created this conflict together, and it's out here somewhere. We're going to kind of take the finger away from pointing it at each other to, we've done this thing together. That's a little bit of drawing together last week and this week, that we have a cycle, we have a pattern. Because of who we each are, we get stuck in this place of conflict, but we're in it together to get out. We want to look at this together and understand what's going on. What I've learned over the years of getting to know Scott, that example he shared, is when he gets defensive, when I've shared my hurt with him, and he gets defensive about that, I know it's coming from a place of protectiveness. He doesn't want to have hurt me. And so he wants to move quickly to that place of saying, get over it. If I can just convince you, you shouldn't be upset about that thing, we'll get through it quicker. And what we've learned over time is that both of us, in fact, need to understand how we've caused the partner to hurt, and then we get to that other side. So again, we're going to share how that goes. We're going to focus on our overt emotions and see what the underlying emotions are that are there. We're going to validate the overt emotions, but we're really going to draw out, what is the underlying emotion here? What's that tender place? Usually, this is another EFT-ism, emotionally focused therapy. therapy talks about these raw spots. What are these tender spots in us? Usually, many of us come to our marriages with tenderness, with childhood wounds or past relationship wounds, or just how we're made to be, that I describe as like these bruises, that isn't necessarily that we're flawed or something is wrong with us, but it's a tender place. And it's a place that maybe we have some work to do to overcome that tenderness, and our partner can do that work with us. By being aware that there's some tender places, we're more likely to move towards conflict with a sense of grace and compassion, and saying, let's look at this tender spot together, and we can get out of it and heal together.
Yeah, and part of that is learning to say, I'm sorry. And it's really funny. With our kids, we can see this really easily, right? So if you have kids, one kid, punches the other kid or breaks something, whatever, and then they turn to each other. And I teach us, hey, say sorry. Like, understand that you hurt their feelings or you did something wrong. And then what do they say? Like, I'm sorry, or yeah, I'm sorry that you're hurting right now. And I see that in my kids, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's not a real apology. But then I model the same behavior sometimes. So, what's not okay to apologize with is to say something like, I'm sorry you feel this way, or, fine, I'm sorry, or, yep, it's always my fault. What? I said sorry, it's always my fault, or I'm sorry I offended you. If you really unpack that, that's not actually I'm sorry, or I'll apologize if you apologize. And we all have our different languages of conflict that we've kind of, like Heather said, we've spent a whole lifetime of like learning how to defend ourselves, learning how to fight certain ways. And it's really important to say, learn to say in our relationships, I'm sorry, and I see that you're hurting. And oftentimes for us, when we can be humble enough to just get to that place of saying, I didn't mean to, and I never would intend to hurt you, but I know now that I've hurt you, and for that I'm truly sorry. Like, even as I say those words on camera, I'm just reminded how many times the relationship shifts, because there's a posture now of saying, in humility, I never meant to hurt you, and I want us to get better together. It's really, really important to learn to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And for those of us that are Christians that are watching this, many of like, hey, yeah, no, I'm a Christian, I go to church, whatever else. Like, this should be something that is easier for us as people of faith, because we recognize that we've been saved by a great God who is for us and who came to earth to live and die for us and be resurrected. And so our whole posture of redemption is based on God doing something for us. And so we should be even better at saying, I blew it, I was wrong, I'm not perfect, can you forgive me? But oftentimes, sometimes, unfortunately, as people of faith, we can become defensive too. And so I don't say that as words of shame. I just want to encourage us as people of faith, if we're going to actually have Christian marriages, they're going to be marriages that model forgiveness and confession and saying, I didn't get it right, but I want to do it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to teach you the step-by-step way to do this, and then Scott and I are going to take you back through it and model how this goes. So if you're a note taker, you could take notes now, or you can just listen, and we'll post these steps for you to see and screenshot on the screen later. So how we forgive, how we reconcile. So Scott and I took from the book Hold Me Tight, or there's a Christian version called Created for Connection, and we've taught this seminar for years, again, based on the research of Sue Johnson and emotionally focused therapy. And what this does is we took this forgiveness conversation and we really parsed it out step by step. And sometimes just this forgiveness conversation has been its own seminar that we've given to many couples and organizations. So we're going to boil this down to this really essential step-by-step, research-based, proven method that is actually so biblical and comes right out of the Bible for how we're wired to be as humans. So first of all, I want you to think about, I want to kind of get you in the mindset of when you've been in an argument with your partner. Maybe it's a recent argument you've had, and just kind of get yourself in that place of what that's like to be in that time. And so first, what's going to happen is, one, the hurt person, the person who has experienced the offense, is going to share about his or her pain without blame or accusation. So step one from the get-go, we shared a little bit about John Gottman's research, is going to have that softened startup. And you're going to start from a place of without blame or accusation. Start by sharing that primary emotion and include specific feelings of hurt or worry or sadness. So you'll give the story of your pain to your partner. And that's what the first step is.
Yeah, the second step is the other person must stay emotionally present and show the hurt person that they care about the pain being revealed. So if we're doing this, we're going to model this in just a minute, but if I turn away, if I'm looking at my phone, if my body language is closed off, if I act annoyed, all these things are saying to the person sharing is, I can't actually handle your hurt right now, that I'm stuck in my own head or my own story. And healthy reconciliation, you'll get a chance to share your hurt too, but you must tune in to say, with even your body language, I want to know how I've hurt you.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes what can prevent us from being that good listener is those defenses that come up, that you're preparing your defense. You're preparing to be right and wrong and prove. And I want to just take you completely out of that mindset, that the job of the listener, as Scott just described, is to be present and to understand. And guess what? You might even disagree. You might even completely think differently. But your job is to show your partner that you get what they're saying because of who they are. That's kind of high-level emotional engagement, but we want to challenge and encourage you to get there. So step two, as Scott just described, is those really good empathic listening skills. And then you come back to step three, where the hurt person shares more about the core of their hurt by then being vulnerable instead of blaming. Based on who I am and what I need, they really own that the hurt has something to do with their vulnerability. And by sharing that, the core of the hurt feelings come out. You're willing to go there by staying with that, telling the partner, this is what it's really like to be me, and I need you to know. This is a vulnerable place. And because of that safety that is created in step two, my partner's really listening, then the hurt partner can go to that deeper place of vulnerability, which is absolutely a good sign that you're on the right track.
Step four is where responsibility starts to really be acknowledged. Step four is where the person who contributed to the hurt says, yeah, I understand that. I get it. I have to turn towards my partner with empathy and connection and accept responsibility. I don't want to move to a place of like, well, I never meant that, and you're being overly sensitive, and you did this thing to me last week. One of my personal favorites is I start bringing up that time of Heather did something some other time. It's like, not important. In the moment of her sharing a hurt, if I see her the way God sees her, holy, beloved child of God, never want to hurt. I never want to hurt her. And so even though it pains me to do it, I have to move into a place and start to accept responsibility. It's my fault that you were hurt. And I see that now, and I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. When a person who feels hurt knows that their partner understands that hurt, that softness begins to come in, and that feeling of forgiveness is just a natural thing that rises up. And so that is when step five takes over, and the person who needs to be understood and listened to is able to identify that. They're able to say, you get it. That is how I felt. And that means that the partner did get it and they got there, but then they can validate that. You do get it. You do understand. And then you can say, this is what I needed then. So we're talking about things that are as, every day as those, annoying habits that somebody continues to do and you've told them 100 times to stop doing it. And you really need them to know this bothers you. And they get it now, and you're saying, okay, what I need you to do is to change that. So you tell them what you need, what you needed then, and what you need now. This also is the big stuff. This works for couples who've had affairs, for partners who felt abandoned by their partner or really offended and hurt. This is the big stuff, and this is the everyday stuff. This formula works for all. And on that fifth step, the partner can say, because you understand my pain, I can move towards forgiveness. And then you say, here's what I needed from you then, because it's safe. It's no longer risky to say, I needed you to be there for me. And I needed you, and I need you to be there for me now. And this is step 5. And then they can offer forgiveness, and then the partner can follow up and promise to be there and promise, and do their best to show up in that way. So those are the 5 steps. We're going to take you through an actual argument that we had to give you an example of how this might go. So the steps are one thing, but to actually kind of find your language is really going to be helpful. So I'll take you back. We
fight sometimes. That's just bad news. We fight sometimes.
So I'm going to start with a little bit about what I shared earlier, that kind of when we know our raw spots and our tender spots. And I'm somebody who really appreciates being listened to. I'm a therapist for a living. I really pay attention, and I pay attention to...
Imagine being married to a therapist. She's a professional at loving people.
Yeah. And for those of you who are Enneagram fans, Scott and I are. I'm an Enneagram 2, so this tells you a little bit about my wiring, and that tenderness in me is, am I going to burden somebody? I never want to burden somebody, and I never want to feel like my need for them is too needy or painful, but I love to really be heard and listened to. So that's the setup. So I was telling Scott one day, we were having a conversation. I was in our bathroom, which is connected to our bedroom, and telling him just about my day and something that I'd been going through that felt really difficult. And as I'm telling the story, he's sort of paying attention, I think. And so I'm still telling him, but he sort of seems like maybe he's not. And then mid-story, he just walks out of the room and goes into the other room. And I'm feeling pretty vulnerable. To be honest, I'm feeling pretty exposed. All that stuff is coming up of like, oh, he doesn't really care about me. And so what comes out of the pursuer in me is, you're such a jerk, kind of out of nowhere. So sort of mid-story, I'm telling the story, and then I'm yelling, you're such a jerk. How did you feel in that moment?
Oh, well, I'm in the closet, like putting clothes away, and all of a sudden she's yelling at me. And so I'm like, I'm just multitasking. I'm just wanting to get some stuff done. Like, why would you go to that? But then when we started to do like this kind of conversation, it started to make sense.
Well, we'll take them step by step. Yeah. But what happened, I'm thinking about when our third born, our little one was little, I relate to this story about when she would tell me stories. She would tell me stories, and I would be multitasking because we had 3 other kids and doing a lot, and I'd be cooking dinner or whatever. And this little one, when she was, 2.5, 3, telling me her stories, she'd go, Mama, look in my eyes. Mama, look in my eyes. And I'd be listening to her, and I'd be thinking, oh, sweetie, I so get you. She just wanted to know I was really listening. And so I have that same little girl in me sometimes where I want to say, look in my eyes. I want to know you're really listening. And in that moment, I felt like I had lost Scott's attention and his love and his connection to me.
And if we're honest, busyness, in many seasons of life, busyness is the big killer of intimacy and relationships. It's not like, oh, I don't love her anymore. It's just like, hey, I'm busy, right? And so I was busy, and I was kind of paying attention, but to walk out of the room and keep folding laundry, I wasn't really paying attention.
Yeah. So when I yell, you're such a jerk, the fight begins. Yeah. The argument is on, and, I blah, 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 back and forth. So we're going to take you through step by step. Yeah. How do we reconcile when we get off track like that? And we understand that this is a lighter issue, and we want you to be thinking about a lighter issue. We know that there's bigger issues at hand. We want to encourage you to practice these steps with a lighter issue so you get really good at it. It's like riding a bike. And then, if you want to take the hard cross-country path, then you go for it. So with this example, first, the hurt person shares about my hurt without blame or accusation. So earlier I did the blaming, I did the accusing, and I want to start by just naming my emotion and my hurt and my worry and sadness. So. And
then step 2, I'm going
to explain it. So in that moment, I called you a jerk. Here's what was going on for me. It reminded me of times when I haven't felt seen, and I feel like I'm, burdening you. And really today was so stressful, and I really just I've been looking forward to telling you about this, and I can tell you've got other things on your mind. And so suddenly what I'm telling myself, which is a Brene Brown-ism, the story I'm telling myself is, I don't matter to you, and I'm actually bothering you, and suddenly I feel all alone. And that's why I called you a jerk.
Yeah, I have my own reasons of wanting to fold the laundry, and I start into my own story. I tell myself of why does she yell at me or blah blah blah. But like when you share it like this, and the fact of the matter is, I walked out on you when you were telling me about a really hard thing, and so yeah, tell me more. That didn't go well. I didn't mean to show that to you, but I get it that I walked out, and I really hurt your feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you understanding that. I mean, if I'm honest with you, it's just a handful of people in my life that I really feel get me and listen to me. And, when I'm doing that all day for others, which I love, I just really look forward to those times where I can be vulnerable with you because I feel so safe with you. And when I take that risk and you walk away, there's a piece of me that says, I'm not going to take that risk anymore because it's too painful. And that's where that place of hurt comes from, is that really, I'm really wanting to feel so close to you. And I just feel really alone.
Yeah, I got defensive and I got angry too. And I'm sorry. I hurt you. I know it wasn't the world's biggest thing, but I did hurt you. And that wasn't my intention. The impact of my actions was not great. And so I'm sorry.
Thank you. I forgive you. I totally can hear that, and I appreciate that you would understand that. That painful part of me is kind of hard to speak about, but just you understanding that makes me feel so much better, and it makes me feel like I can tell you those things. So in the future, I guess probably what I need is just to have your eye contact, like our little one would say, look in my eyes, and and I might be able to just do a better job of saying this is kind of a big deal story. I know we're kind of busy and doing it in passing, but maybe I could cue you in and just say, hey, could you really give me a minute here? I would love to share this with you.
Yeah, I could work on that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen, there's this great video, maybe we can insert it here if we get a chance, but it's a comical version it's called It's Not About the Nail. And they do a really good job of kind of going back and finding their way through humor to that place of really getting to the core of this that says, I see your pain and I understand your pain. And by seeing it and understanding it, somebody can move through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now it's your turn. We're going to give you some time. And the exercise, the steps are going to be on the screen. Heather's already described them. Heather's already encouraged you to pick a simple issue to work your way through. And each of you take a turn sharing. I just want to say this conversation will be really hard for many of us as we have this. Have grace for each other. Have courage to lean into what God wants to say through your partner.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to hand it over to you. We're going to put some music on the background. We're going to list the steps on the screen. We encourage you to take a screenshot or to take a picture with your phone so you'll have this. And in fact, this is going to relate to the homework we're going to give you this week. But that'll give you a chance to have that for later. So take a picture, take turns, and we're going to give you about 15 minutes. If you need a little more time, go ahead and just push pause and take maybe 5 to 10 more minutes. Now, don't pick the hottest issue. Don't pick the deepest, darkest thing that you're really working through right now. Pick something on the lighter side, because the point is for you to practice these steps. The main thing that we want to teach you today is how to do things differently. People don't typically take the time to go through these arguments step by step to work towards reconciliation. In fact, many people who've been through our course and have gone through therapy with me will pull this exact worksheet out and use it as a script to say, okay, you take your turn, I'll take my turn. And they have said over and over again how helpful it is. So we want you to use it like that. Use it as your script. Take turns. And like Scott said, there's lots of grace. You're just figuring this stuff out. You're moving away from defensiveness and towards understanding and empathy of each other. And ideally, each partner will get a turn. So one partner will get to share their concern, and the listener gets to listen and respond and show empathy and compassion. And then you'll reverse those roles, and the other partner gets to share a concern, and you get to practice the other side of it. This is an awesome thing for building empathy for both sides of the conflict as well. And so we'll be back together with you to do a little recap. So grace and peace to you as you work through some reconciliation conversations. All right, welcome back. We hope that went well, and we know that this is a hard one. And so it's okay if it didn't. You're trying something new and you'll fumble your way through, and that's okay. We want to encourage you to keep trying. And so to recap what we've learned today is the main thing about having a redemptive, reconciling, forgiveness conversation is that it truly is a step-by-step process where the partner who has been hurt needs to know that their hurt impacts the other, that the hurt caused matters to them, that they're not trying to just defend against it or explain it away, but they're really showing that they care that their partner was hurt. This is high-level stuff, and this is the absolute antidote to conflict. One of the stories that I like to share with couples is this idea that with kiddos, often what we're doing in therapy when they've experienced something really hard or traumatic is they act it out through play or through art. And I think of this one little kiddo who their house burned down, and I'll change some details so you would not identify this family, but this little kiddo's house burned down. And so he kept drawing a picture of that house and the little boy in the window and how scary that was. And his parents were saying how sad this was for them to see their kiddo kept drawing this house on fire. And that was so scary. But as we explored what was happening for this kiddo was getting their pain out. They were showing that picture to their parents to say, this was scary for me. This was hard for me. And by those parents saying, I understand, tell me about that pain, that helped that little boy to work through that trauma that he experienced in that fire. It's the same when we experience conflict with our partner, especially the big conflicts, the big betrayals, the big hardship. A piece of us feels like, how could you burn my house down? How could you possibly bring that much hurt to me when you love me? And so when we bring it up over and over and we have to draw that house on fire for a while, we simply need our partner to witness that pain, to look at that with us and help to understand and say, I get that that was painful for you. That's the antidote that we want to work you towards. So step one, you consolidate your pain from a softer place and help your partner understand. Step two, your partner listens and they take it in and they do reflective good listening. Is this how it felt? Tell me more, till they really understand. Partner responds. Step three is to say, you get it, let me tell you more. This taps into those vulnerable raw spots in me, the tenderness in me that makes me a human being but needs some tenderness. And with that, the partner is listening and he can say, I get it. I get why I've caused the pain. And now they can make sense of how that came to be. This isn't a time for making excuses, but you can help bring a story together that helps them understand, I really blew it that day, or I really made a mistake. And I get now the impact that it had on you. And this is where the apology comes in. And then step five is the forgiveness. Step five is when that person who's hurt can say, you really get it. You understand my hurt, so I feel safe to forgive you. Because bottom line, if we're in relationships with people that continually hurt us and we just sweep it under the rug and move through the pain, that's not a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is one where you can rebuild trust and reignite that connection for there to be true reconciling conversations.
There's so much in the Bible that talks about going through situations in order to understand more fully God's grace and power. And though many of us would like to go around things, God takes us through things in order to reveal more of his character in us. In the book of Romans, Paul says, let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit and serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer. So if you're struggling right now, if there's a lot of conflict, be patient in your suffering. What can we do? Persevere in prayer. Rejoice in hope that God is with you in the midst of this storm, and that you might want to just can we just go around this, please? God's got something for you through this. He really wants to make you more of the couple he intends for you, and that's learning how to deal with conflict.
Absolutely. So this really builds on what we taught last week. If you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, we encourage you to take some time When you get stuck in your cycle and you begin to identify we're in conflict, the next layer is having a redemptive, reconciling conversation. And in order to do that, take that picture out, go through step by step, and when a conflict comes up sometime this week, you can take these steps in practice. What we want to encourage you is to have 2 of these conversations before we gather again next week. Ideally, one partner and another partner. Maybe you spread it out, Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that. But give a chance to really give about a half hour of time to sit down and step by step have a deeper conversation that is a redemptive and reconciling conversation. And then we'll join you next week and talk about some exciting things about living into life goals and dreams, creating meaning and purpose, and some really fun stuff that's going to keep you connected for the lifetime of your marriage.
Let me pray for you before we go. Lord Jesus, thank you for the couples on the stream. Be with them in conflict. Teach them how to say sorry. Teach them how to forgive. Lord, let there be resilience through reconciliation for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.